Hello, class. Today we have a question involving circles. So the question says, find the equation for the circle with a diameter whose endpoints are -4, -1, and 2, 3. So the best thing for me to do here is probably let's sketch this out and then we can talk about it for a minute, okay? So what do we need to create the equation of a circle? And you guys can see that I copied and pasted. This is from a student. They weren't quite sure how the equation was being created using this information. So there's two things that you need. I have the answer up here, but I'm going to show you how to derive that answer. But there's two things that you need to create the equation of a circle. Let me first write the equation of a circle. Standard form for the equation of a circle is x minus h all squared plus y minus k all squared is equal to r squared. And that h and that k, that is the center point for the circle. That R stands for your radius of your circle. All right, your radius is the distance from the center of the circle to the outside of the circle. And one other thing I would like to point out here before I sketch out this circle is that if you notice in parentheses here, I have -h and -k. I mean, kind of, right? Or -h. But when you look in parentheses at the bottom where we pulled out the variables for our center, the signs change. So what I want to point out to you is that in standard form for the equation of the circle, the sign of the center point looks different, okay? All right, so saying that, let's take the information we have. It says find the equation for the circle with a diameter. Diameter is related to radius. The radius is the distance from the center of the circle to the outside of the circle, to the edge of the circle, right? To a point that is actually on the circle. The diameter is the distance from one point on the circle through the radius to the other side of the circle. So your radius is half the length of that diameter, okay? So it says the diameter whose endpoints are -4, -1. So let's scoot up just a bit. So -4 would be 1, 2, 3, 4, -1, which is right there. And 2, 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. All right. So that is the endpoints of our diameter. So what I know is that the radius is right in the middle. It's right between those 2 points. So we have to go back and use an equation that is not really evident in the equation of a circle, but what you need to do is find the midpoint. Okay, you have to kind of understand what it is that we're finding here. That radius is between those 2 points. So I need to find the midpoint of these 2 points. And your midpoint is found by taking your two x values, adding them together, and divide by 2. What just happened? And divide by 2. And then you're going to take your two y values, add them together, and divide by 2. So my 2 points here were my x value was -4 for my x of 1. Let's label that. This would be my x of 1. This would be my y sub 1. This would be my x sub 2. And then this would be my y sub 2. So add your two x values together and divide by 2. And then we're going to add those two y values together. Oh no, don't do that again. I have it on auto where it creates shapes, and now it's wanting to create shapes that I don't need. Okay, so my midpoint here would be equal to -4 plus 2, which is -2. -2. Let's put on my points. Let's do every step. And then -1 plus 3 is +2. And if I simplify this, my midpoint would be equal to -1, 1. So I'm going to use, let's use a different color here. Let's use red for my midpoint. So my midpoint would be a -1, +1 right there in red. And that does look like it's in the middle. Okay, so if I didn't explicitly say this earlier, you can see that when you create the equation of a circle, you really need two things. You need your center point, which is what I just found, okay? And I should label that. I found that center point by finding my midpoint of that diameter. And then the other thing you need to create the equation of a circle is the radius. Now, your radius is the distance. Your radius is right here. It is the distance from the center of your circle to the end or the outside, to a point that is actually on the circle. I want to be careful about how I say that. So I can find the radius from that red point, which is my center, to either one of those blue points. The distance would be the same. It doesn't matter which one I choose, but I'm going to choose that point there that is at 2, 3. So I need to find the distance between these 2 points right there. And let's do that over here in red. The way you find your distance is found by taking the square root of your x sub 2 minus x sub 1 all squared, and then you add that to your y sub 2 minus y sub 1 all squared. Now, this is one of those equations that if you don't know it, if you've forgotten it, it's one of those equations that you really need to know for algebra. Midpoint we need to know is very important in algebra, and distance is another one of them that is very important in algebra. So now if I'm going to use this, I have to go back and think about what is my x sub 1 and what is my x sub 2. I'm going to erase what I had labeled earlier as my x sub 1 and x sub 2. I'm using different points now. I'm going to use that point 2, 3, which is one of the points that is on the circle. Then I'm going to use my center, which we found to be at -1, 1. And if I label this, I can label this as x sub 1, y sub 1, x sub 2, y sub 2. You have to be careful about which points you're using. You've got to understand why. Why am I now using different points? I'm using different points because I'm finding something different. Earlier, I was trying to find a midpoint. Now, I'm trying to find the distance between 2 points, right? And the points were different points. All right, so let's just take what we have and plug in. So my distance is equal to the square root of my x sub 2. I labeled that as -1 minus my x sub 1, which is 2, all squared, plus my y sub 2, which is 1, minus my y sub 1, which is 3, all squared. My distance is going to be equal to the square root of -1 minus 2, which is -3, all squared, plus 1 minus 3, which is -2, all squared, which leaves me with the square root of 9 plus 4. 9 plus 4 is 13. So what I know is that the distance from the center point to the outside point, I don't know if this is, oh no, let's undo. It don't want me. Let's see if I can zoom in. Okay, the distance there is actually the square root of 13. Okay, that is my radius. So I know that let's write down what we know. We know and I'm going to write this as it appears in the equation of a circle. My center, which is my HK, we know that that is at point -1, 1. And then we know that my radius, which is the distance from the midpoint to the circle itself, is the square root of 13. Now, the equation of a circle is x minus h all squared plus y minus k all squared is equal to r squared. So x, let's plug in what we have. My h here is actually a -1. And there's two different ways I could do this, but I'm going to say minus my h, which is -1. And I'm going to close my parentheses, all squared, plus y minus, let's use a different color, my k is a +1, is equal to my r, I haven't used green, my r, which I found over here, my r is equal to the square root of 13. But I have to remember to square that. Guys, if you pay attention, anytime I have an operation, as in I am subtracting a negative, right? There's something going on there. I know something funny happens there. I wrap that -1 in parentheses because I am squaring that square root of 13. I like to wrap that in parentheses. Be careful how you write things. Many times my students in their head, they understand what it is that they're supposed to be doing, but because they don't write it neatly so that they can follow themselves, we kind of run into issues. Okay, but let's simplify this. So I know that when I subtract a negative, that is the same thing as adding. So I can rewrite that as adding. So that would be x plus 1 all squared plus, I have no idea why my computer is acting up, y minus 1, and I forgot my squared up there. I apologize. Is equal to, guys, I have a square root of 13, and then I have that square. I don't know what is going on here. That square, but those will kind of cancel one another out, and that will just leave me with 13. And let's go back and check what we have. Is that what they had up there as their answer? We ended up with this, and they ended up with that. And guys, it looks like we have the same answer. So if you have any other questions about this, feel free to shoot me an email.